Good morning, dear Sangha. Today is the 25th of November in the year 2004, and we are in the Lower Hamlet during our Fall Retreat. This morning we spoke about a telephone line that should be called the compassionate line. And we hope that that line should be established everywhere, so that the young people in their despair, in their suffering, in their strong emotions, may have a chance to talk to someone who could understand them. We learned that the number of young people who die, who commit suicide every day is very alarming. "33 of them every day in France is a lot. And we should do something in order to avoid that kind of damage. The young people, they feel lonely, they feel cut off, even from their parents. And when they have a strong emotion, they suffer so much, they don't know how to handle the suffering. They may think that the only way to stop suffering is to go and kill themselves. The compassionate line should be there for them. In a moment of despair, of utmost suffering, they should be able to talk to someone. And who is that someone? A psychotherapist, a doctor, a teacher, or someone who has the capacity of listening. Who is that one that is ready to listen to them? And each of us has to make a vow to become that person. In the Buddhist tradition, we speak of a person who has the capacity of listening to the people who suffer, and that person is named Avalokiteshvara. Avalokiteshvara means the one who is capable of listening. And we call that person the bodhisattva of deep listening, the bodhisattva of compassionate listening. And that capacity of that capacity to listen deeply with compassion has to be cultivated. If you are a friend, you should be able to listen to your friend with compassion and deeply, in order to be really a true friend. If you are a parent, then you should be able to listen with compassion and deeply to your child. And you should transform yourself into the bodhisattva of deep listening. Because without deep listening, without compassionate listening, there will be no communication. And in many cases, we live with love. We truly love and wish that the other person be happy. But we are not able to listen. Without the capacity of listening deeply, we cannot understand. And without understanding, love is not real. Love is not possible. In the teaching of the Buddha, Love is something that is born from the ground of understanding. You cannot love unless you understand. And this is so easy to understand. A husband that doesn't understand his wife, how could he love her? A wife does not understand her husband. If she does not understand the difficulties, the despair, the hope of her husband, how could she love her? That is why her practice as a wife is to listen deeply with compassion, with no prejudices, in order to understand her husband. And if the father does not understand the son, the daughter, does not know what is the kind of difficulties his son is undergoing, and then how could that father love his son? That is why it's so clear, so simple to see that understanding is the ground of love. You cannot say that you love him or her unless you understand him or her. And understanding is not something that just happens like that. You have to practice looking deeply. You have to practice listening deeply in order to really understand. You have to be able to give up your ideas, your prejudices, because you may already have an idea as how that person can be happy, and you want to impose that idea on him or on her. And by doing so, you make him or her suffer, but you don't know. You still believe that you continue to love him or her. You may be very sincere. You may have a lot of love within yourself. But that is not love yet. That is the intention to love. The willingness to love and to make one person happy. That's not love yet. In order to truly love, you have to understand. And that is why if we love someone, we should try to understand him or her deeply. Understanding what? The kind of difficulties that person has. The kind of suffering that person has within himself, herself. The kind of deep hope, deep desire that the person has within himself or herself. The kind of obstacles that person is encountering in his or her daily life. You have to see all of that. And if you don't see everything, then how could you see everything? You can see a lot, but not everything. And you should ask him or her. You should go and say, darling, do you think I understand you enough? And then she will tell you. He will tell you. If you ask with all your heart, darling, do you think I understand you enough? You can ask the question to your partner, to your father, to your mother, to your daughter, to your son. And if it's a real question, if that is a question that is asked with all your being, and then that person will tell you and help you to understand more. And when you understand, you will not continue to do or to say things that will make him or her suffering. You will help him or her to overcome the difficulties. And that is true love. True love comes from understanding. The compassionate line cannot be set up by the telephone company alone. Well, you only have to pay something and then they will set up a line. But that does not mean that with telephone you can communicate. Now telephone is everywhere. You can pick up one everywhere in your city. And yet with the telephone in your hand, you cannot communicate. In order to communicate really, you have to be free of your views, your opinions, your judgments. You have to be free of your prejudices. And then with the absence of prejudices and judgment, you have the opportunity to look deeply and to see reality in itself, the reality of the other person. Because you declare that you love him, you love her, but you have not really understood him or her at all. You have to practice looking deeply by yourself, and you can ask that person to help you to understand. And that is the practice of love. But you might think that it is the other person that you have not understood. Because the fact remains that you have not understood yourself. You don't know enough about yourself. You don't understand the nature of your suffering, of your own suffering. You have not understood the difficulties that you are going through. You don't understand the nature of your difficulties, the roots of the difficulties, and your desire. You are in a difficult situation. And because you don't understand your own situation, you don't understand yourself, you continue to be caught in a situation. And even you don't even want to get out of that situation. There is a young nun of 19 who wrote to Thay the other day, and she told Thay about her life as a teenager. There's something very true in what she said. She said, Thay, when you are caught in a situation, you might think that that situation is normal. And you don't see yourself in that situation. And that is why you don't have the desire to get out of the situation. Unless someone come and take you to a far away place, maybe a little bit higher, and look back to your situation, that you have a chance to see that that is a situation that you don't want to be. And that is a kind of enlightenment. And if you don't have the desire to get out of that situation, you will never get out of it. And that is why the first thing you do is to have a desire to get out of that situation. And you get that desire only by leaving that place, going to a faraway place and look back. And now you see that this is not a good situation. You and your beloved one are caught in that situation. And you want to get out, and you want your beloved one to get out also, because both you are suffering deeply every day. So first of all, there is a desire, there should be a desire to get out. And if you are the first one who is able to get out, you'll be able to help rescue the other person and help the other person to taste the taste of freedom and true love. Because true love, true happiness cannot be without freedom. Every one of us has an idea as what happiness is. And we are committed to that idea. We said that if I cannot get this and that, well, happiness will not be possible. So you describe your happiness, you have an idea of your happiness, and you are striving not to arrive at that. Suppose a young person who fall in love with someone else, and in her passion, attachment, she could not see more than that person. She said that that person is the only reason why she has to be alive. Her raison d'être. If she cannot marry that person, it's better that she die. Because happiness cannot be possible without that person beside her. And her idea is to get him or to die. Only. But for those of us who have not got into that situation, we are able to see that happiness can come from every direction. Happiness can come from the west, from the east, from the north, from the south, from the above, from the below. And if we are committed to just one idea of happiness, and then we block all the avenues, we block all the venues, happiness come and knock on your door. Please, open, I am happiness. You say, no, you are not happiness. And you refuse every opportunity to be happy because you are already committed to one idea of happiness. And many young people commit suicide because they cannot marry the person they love. In the history of love, there are plenty of things like that. And those of us who are free, we see that happiness can come from everywhere and at every moment. The sunshine, the morning sunshine can bring happiness. Half an hour of walking leisurely can bring happiness. Having a cup of tea with our friend or our teacher can bring a lot of happiness. Happiness can be there every moment of our life. Why do we have to commit ourselves to just one idea of happiness? So this morning we spoke of joy and happiness born from the practice of releasing, of letting go. And the first thing we have to let go is our idea of happiness. If we are able to let go of our idea of happiness, happiness will come very easily. If you are not happy, it may be because you are holding very hard to your idea of happiness. And if your beloved one is not happy because you keep imposing your idea of happiness on him or on her, it's very, very clear, very simple. In the Buddhist teaching of love, we learn that there are 4 elements that can provide true love and happiness. And the first element is Maitri. Maitri means Maitri means friendship, brotherhood. The word Maitri comes from the root Mitra. Mitra means friend. L'amitié, la fraternité. When you love someone, you offer your friendship, your brotherhood. And friendship and brotherhood does not deprive him or her of his or her freedom. When you love, you maintain your whole freedom and you help maintain the freedom of the person you love. You don't deprive him or her of his or her freedom. The offering of happiness. in your relationship with the other person, ask the question that whether you have Maitri to offer him or her. We are on an equal basis. By loving you, I retain my freedom. And by loving you, I respect your freedom. And that is Maitri. That we translate poorly as loving kindness. There should be a better word. And a friend that does not understand a friend cannot really offer his brotherhood, his friendship. And that is why to cultivate Maitri, you have to cultivate understanding. You spend your time with him or with her, with mindfulness, and you discover every day his need, his difficulties, his obstacles, his deep aspiration. And on that base of understanding, you offer Maitri, happiness. And the second is Karuna. Karuna means the capacity to understand the suffering and help remove it, transform it. The person you love has suffering in him or in her, have difficulties in him or in her. You, as someone who loves him or her, you should be able to identify that suffering, that difficulties, and try to help remove it. And the capacity of helping remove that suffering called compassion. Transforming suffering in a person you love, because you see the suffering in the person of your beloved one. And if you are not able to help him or her remove that suffering, you are not a real lover. And we used to translate Karuna as compassion. The other person suffers, and you suffer with her, you share suffering. That is the word of compassion. But in true love, you don't have to suffer with him. You understand only. And your capacity of understanding help the other person not to suffer anymore. When a patient comes to a doctor, the doctor is supposed to be able to see what is wrong within the patient, what is the sickness, and the root of the sickness in the person. That is exactly Karuna. And the doctor, after having identified the illness and the root of the illness, is capable of prescribing something for the removal of that illness. And the doctor doesn't have to suffer together with the patient. And that is why the word compassion is not perfect in translating. The Buddha also, he sits there, people come and cry with him, and he doesn't have to cry with them. He said, dear friends, I understand your suffering, but there is a way for you to go in order to. If the Buddha spent his time crying with Peter, he doesn't have any time left in order to help with the transformation and healing. So, in your relationship, ask the question as whether you have the element of compassion in your love. If you do, and then you are being very helpful, you are helping that person to suffer less. Your presence only helps that person to feel better. And your speech, your action, your capacity of listening deeply help him or her transform and remove the suffering. And that is the element called karuna. And in our relationship, we should be able to cultivate karuna every day. And the third element is called mudita. Joy. The kind of joy that is shared by both. If in your relationship there is only sadness, you make him cry and he make you cry, that's not love. True love should include joy. And you are able to enjoy his own joy, and he is able to enjoy your joy, because you are no longer two separate entities. You are one with the person you love. And that is why when you see that person happy, you feel very happy. And when you see that person unhappy, you are able to do something in order to help. You consider his happiness as yours. You don't say, that's your problem. In true love, there is no statement like that. Sympathetic joy. Your joy is his joy, and his joy is your joy. And you have to be able to offer joy. The question is, in your relationship, are you able to offer joy? Or you make her cry all the time? If you make him or her cry all the time, that's not true love. The willingness to love, the willingness to make him or her happy, yes, it may be there. But the capacity to love, to make him or her happy, is not yet there. It is to be cultivated. And the fourth element is upeksha. And upeksha means non-discrimination. And this is a higher form of love. You love him, it's not because that person belongs to the same race, having the same kind of skin color, or sharing the same kind of spiritual path. It's not because of that. You love that person because that person suffers and needs your love. That's all. Non-discrimination, the path of non-discrimination. Suppose you have 4 children, and you realize that all of them are your children. You don't want to prefer one over the 3 others. You practice upeksha, equanimity. You love Mr. Gary because Mr. Gary speaks for you, but you don't love Mr. Bush because Mr. Bush is doing the thing that you don't like. There is no equanimity in your love. Even if John Kerry has ideas that are close to you, but you still love Mr. Bush. You say, well, Mr. Bush, I have to help him also. Because if I am able to help him, I help the other half of the population. I have to do something in order to offer him more understanding, more compassion, so that he will handle the problem in the Middle East, in Iraq, in a more compassionate way. You have to love him. So you love both of them. And for American voters, it's very difficult to persuade them to love both. I have tried, but I have not succeeded. Because equanimity is inclusiveness. When you love, your love should include everyone. Whether he is black or white, or brown or yellow. Whether he is Catholic or Protestant or Jew or Buddhist or communist, you have to love them all. That is why equanimity reveals a higher level of love. It's not that young man is your son that you have to love him and you exclude the other young men. You are a true lover. You have to include sons of other families. And when you can love the sons and the daughters of other families, you are in a position to be a politician, to be a teacher. And therefore, all of us have to cultivate the quality of equanimity. The king is supposed to love everyone in the country as his or her own sons and daughters. And the king is supposed to practice equanimity. And in the tradition of Buddhism, it is said that Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and Upeksha can be cultivated every day, because these are four qualities that have no limits. Infinite love. And the four elements are called the four unlimited. Because the Maitri can become unlimited. And this is kind of love we might call love without frontiers. And when you have developed your love to that level, you are called a bodhisattva. You are called a Buddha. And there are Buddhas and bodhisattvas in our midst, in the world. There is an organization of doctors who want to serve people everywhere, not only in France, in Great Britain, but also in Africa and Asia. And they call themselves Médecins Sans Frontières. Sans frontières, that is the word. Love without limits, frontiers. And you can develop these four qualities because when your heart is able to embrace everyone, every living being, it has no longer any frontier. Your heart becomes immense. And when the love in your heart is like that, you don't suffer anymore. You don't suffer anymore. You can accept everything. And the Buddha gave a very beautiful image. He said, suppose you have a bowl of water and you have a handful of salt, and you pour all the salt in the water and you stir, and the water becomes undrinkable. It's too salty. You cannot quell your thirst, because that is a solution, salty. But suppose you, with that handful of salt, you throw it into a river. And although the salt is diluted in the water, people continue to drink the water. And they don't suffer at all. Why? Because the river is immense. And that is why a handful of salt cannot make the river suffer. And even if you throw a handful after handful, 100, because the river is still immense, the river still doesn't suffer. So the technique is to enlarge your heart, to make it into something unlimited. And when your heart becomes immense, you can accept everything. The small things, like a handful of salt, does not make you suffer anymore. And if your heart is small, and small things can make you very unhappy. But in the case you have a big heart that can include everyone, every living being, you don't suffer anymore. And that is the quality of equanimity, all-embracing. Once we have karuna, maitri, mudita, and upeksha, we have a tremendous amount of energy within us. And the line of communication can be established very easily. We can listen very deeply with compassion. We can understand right away the other person. What we say, what we do will not make him or her suffer anymore. And everywhere we can establish that line, that compassionate line between us and the other person. The bodhisattva of love is in you. Avalokiteshvara, you are able to listen, to understand, and you are free. And that is why in our relationship, we should be able to establish a communication line. And the current that circulates in that line should be the current of maitri, karuna, mudita, and upeksha. And when the other listens to the voice of compassion, of loving kindness, of non-discrimination in us, the suffering in him or her will vanish. And the idea to kill himself or to kill herself will vanish. And that line will be able to save many people. So if in your relationship with someone, whether that is your partner, your mother, or your husband, your wife. There are difficulties, there's suffering. You should be able to set up that line of communication. Work it within yourself first, before you set up the line. And after the line is ready, you can call him, call her, darling. I know that there's a lot of suffering, uneasiness, difficulty in you. I know. In the past, I have said things, I have done things that have made the situation worse. Now, I already understand. I don't want to continue like that. So darling, please tell me about your suffering, your difficulties, your deepest aspiration. I am free now. I am able to listen to you. And the line begins to work. I know that I have not understood you enough. Now my desire, deepest desire, is to understand you deeply, so that I will not make you suffer anymore like I have done in the past. That is what we call loving speech, compassionate speech. Thanks to the line we just established, the compassionate line. You may like to give a color to that line. It should not be red. Being rouge. And thanks to that line of communication, you'll be able to help transform the other person and bring her happiness and freedom. And when you speak through that line with compassion like that, the other person will tell you and help you to understand him or her more. I wish you good luck and good practice.
Je souris à l'étoile qui au ciel encore luit, au soleil qui lentement nous sort de la nuit, à ce jour qui commence, à l'oiseau qui m'enchante. Je souris au monde et le monde me sourit. Je souris à l'enfant qui vient sur mon chemin. Je pense aussi à tous ceux qui ont faim, ceux qui loin dans ce monde vivent dans la misère, qui ont connu la guerre, qui ont perdu leur mère. Si parfois mon sourire se mouille de pleurs, en voyant de ce monde la profonde douleur, je veux sourire encore à travers mes pleurs, sourire à la vie, sourire à la mort. Et un jour viendra où il fera très froid, où je ne laisserai plus la trace de mes pas, par le courant de la vie qui jamais ne s'arrête, me laisserai-je entraîner sans regarder derrière. La peur alors ne fermera plus le chemin, mon cœur tout grand s'ouvrira enfin. Je deviendrai alors le sourire de la Et un jour peut-être, dans un tout petit enfant, je rouvrirai les yeux aux merveilles de la vie. Et un peu plus aimant, un peu plus souriant, je continuerai ce beau chemin. I smile to the star that still shine in the sky, to the sun that slowly guides us out of the night, to the day that begins, to the enchanting moon. I smile to the world, and the world smiles to me. I smile to the child that crosses my way. I remember also all those who are hungry, those who live in misery all over the planet, who had to face a war, who lost their mother. If sometimes my smile is moistened by tears, when I see the great pain that spreads over the world, I shall still be smiling with tears in my eyes, smiling to life, smiling to death. And one day will come when it is bitterly cold, when even my footsteps will not leave anymore. The never-ending current of life's energy will carry me along, and I will not look back. The fear will no longer block my way. My heart finally opens very wide. Then I will become the smile of the earth, of the flower, of the rain, of the sun and the wind. And one day, perhaps in a very small time, I will open my eyes to the wonders of life, and a little more loving, and a little more smiling, I will continue this wonderful way. Et un jour peut-être, quand il fera très froid, où je ne laisserai plus la trace de mes pas, par le courant de la vie qui jamais ne s'arrête, me laisserai-je entraîner sans regarder derrière. La peur alors ne fermera plus le chemin. Mon cœur tout grand s'ouvrira enfin. Je deviendrai alors le sourire de la terre, de la fleur, de l'oiseau, de la pluie et du vent. Et un jour peut-être, dans un tout petit enfant, je rouvrirai les yeux aux merveilles de la vie, et un peu plus aimant, un peu plus souriant, je continuerai ce beau chemin.